Welcome to Nature and Climate House. This is our first morning of events. We're the second event of the day. I'm so thrilled to be having this conversation. Yesterday at the opening evening, we had Minister Kerry McCarthy, who's the first minister I'm aware of in charge of climate change for Britain, who actually has citizen engagement as one of her KPIs. It's in her job description. And I thought that was quite fascinating. We had a chat with her about forging a cultural revolution and how the UK and a country like Brazil, whose ambassador joined us as well, and the arts industries and the creatives and the brands and so on are all sort of really opening up space to intersect and have much more interesting conversations, certainly, than I've seen in the years that I've worked on climate change. And I think there's this real sort of opening up of a need to shift narratives, to shift mindsets, to open space for the public and for leaders from every sector and every institution to find a role that they can play in this regard. So with that in mind, one of the industries that we always, from the outside looking on, deeply admire, many of us wish that we had the skills and talent to be part of it, but, is the film industry. So I'm here with four people who know vastly more than I do to sort of shape an inquiry as to sort of what is the real role of the film industry. We all sort of understand the interest in celebrity and filmmakers and famous people, but how much deeper does the story have to go to have a real impact? Pardon the pun, it was very, very poor. So without further ado, let me please introduce, and I'll ask you each just to say your name and what you do in the industry and how that makes a difference, to sort of how that plays a part within a wider ecosystem. And then maybe we'll sort of have a little bit of a discussion about where does this great ambition begin and where does it end, and structurally how do we make it work? So without further ado, let me ask Bill, would you sort of say a bit about what you do and how you've come to this conversation?
So my name's Bill Nicholson, and I'm a writer, a screenwriter mostly, and I'm here because I agree with everybody else here that the stories that we tell in the world, particularly the stories that become very popular, actually strongly affect the culture, and the culture affects the politics. And I think if we can get the story out there, I mean, last night I watched Jesse Armstrong's Mountainhead. I don't know if any of you have seen it. And that's all about billionaires destroying the world and not caring. Now, that's a very strong, simple message, but he does it so powerfully that that's now gone into my head. I now think the tech billionaires do not care about human beings. Whether that's true or not, that's the story he's telling. The more that story is told, the more we will see tech billionaires not as saviors, but as demons. That's how storytellers control the world, by the story that gets accepted. So I want to be part of the angels. I want to be telling the stories that I think are really important. It's really difficult, and we'll talk later about how to do that, because it can become preachy and boring and nobody listens. But if we can get it right, we are the legislators of the world.
That's fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about you as a performer. You're on you've been on a few sides of business, but you've been on more the sort of the other side, the more visible side of the industry. Tell us a bit about you and how you came to be part of this conversation.
Sure. So I'm a jobbing actor, which means I spend most of my career auditioning, as Danusia would agree. But as you say, I was sort of also a climate activist, and I've worked in trying to decarbonize the insurance industry and pension funds and stuff like that. I was a real geek for climate finance, and saw a glimpse of what Bill's talking about. Like, saw that we as an industry, actually relative to others, we don't have the biggest carbon footprint. But we do have this big cultural footprint. We're so visible. And so I was feeling like there was a sort of avenue here, but feeling kind of powerless to figure out how it would all come together. And so with a bunch of friends, we formed this group called Equity for a Green New Deal. And it was sort of grassroots, just a bunch of other jobbing actors figuring out how they could make impact. And one idea that really took off, which Danusia brought into the mix, was this idea for a green rider, which is just basically like, a rider is something an artist requests to help them do their job. They've got this kind of notoriety about them because we've heard stories of like Motley Crue saying no brown M&Ms or whatever. But they can be used for social impact. So we have seen diversity riders, and we also see green riders, somebody going, yeah, I'll do this job if we can have green energy on set, and I want to take a train, not a plane. Those are the sort of things that we try to advocate for. And the way it sort of ties into what Bill's talking about is that, if we can get actors walking the walk, then they're more empowered to talk the talk. And also, this is a sort of great avenue for those actors who go, I've sort of done the green rider thing, and I want to clean up what I see in front of me, the industry I see in front of me. But how can I use my influence and my voice to make an even bigger impact? And what we're finding in partnership with Climate Spring, who Bill was talking about, is that story, character is a really powerful way to do that.
With that fantastic introduction, why don't we just go the other way around? Sabrina, tell us a little bit about you and your work with the industry, and just help us understand. Many of us understand the sort of mothership organisation BAFTA, but the uniqueness of Albert would be great to sort of learn about too. And then Danusia, please tell us a bit about you and how you came to this point.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I work at BAFTA Albert. I work maybe on the less exciting side, which is the off-screen stuff, but BAFTA Albert does a range of things. So many people know BAFTA, but BAFTA Albert has been the convener of sustainability in the screen industry for, I think this is our 15th anniversary year, so quite a while before it became the hot topic that it is now. So we have 4 main areas of work which are outlined in our climate action blueprint, and they are climate content, which we're working with Climate Spring and Green Rider on that side, culture and capability, so how do we empower and educate the industry and those who work in it, standards measurement and reporting, so what good looks like, all of our tools in terms of our carbon calculator, and then sustainable production, which is really my area of work. So what are the big impact areas, things that you think about, so things like travel and energy, but also things you don't. So how do night shoots affect biodiversity and things like that. So there's quite a lot behind the scenes that all build up into quite an impactful industry. It might not be the highest in kind of carbon emissions, but it has a lot of impact both on and off screen. So that's what I'm really passionate about, how we can kind of support the crew, work with the talent, mobilise as an industry to make sure on and off screen we're having that impact.
And Danusia, tell us a bit about you and kind of what brought you to this journey where it's sort of as much about educating your colleagues in the field as it is about, doing the work you do.
Yeah, so I, as Will mentioned, kind of was looking for a tribe of actors who were as engaged on the kind of concerns around not climate but also fairness and equity within our workplace, and we talk a lot as a group about just transitions and the kind of sense that it needs to be inclusive and I can hear like a weird ominous hum that it needs to feel inclusive for all. We built a lot on the work that BAFTA Albert was already doing, and I think we've continued as a group to sort of act as a conduit and a facilitator of communications, because actors sort of stand in the middle of so many areas. So BAFTA Albert created a Green Rider in 2020, and then with COVID and stuff, it sort of, actors didn't pick it up. The priority became about let's get everyone back to work, and the environment got completely forgotten. And we sort of found this rider and got actor peers and producers and people from Albert and sustainability workers to kind of look at it and look at how we could update it and make it kind of more like, you know, it's going to constantly need modernising, but also kind of how does it become more actor friendly? How is it something that can be communicated clearly? And that's just a lesson that we're kind of evolving, and we're beginning to build relationships across the industry so that we're not doubling the work up. So we can keep learning from Albert all the time, passing that information to actors. We work really closely with Climate Spring, looking at how actors can become involved in what is on screen as well as how they behave off screen. And we're kind of looking at the various ways that we can become communicators in the industry.
Just a quick AV check. We're getting a little bit of, quite a bit of feedback is the word I was looking for. Thank you. Is that okay?
Sounds like someone's hoovering.
Yeah.
Or like doom is coming.
I know. Well, this is it sort of just really showcases the complexity and depth of any industry, and particularly one where most of the employed people in the industry are in fact their own businesses and self-employed. And so, you know, how do we see the interactivity between democracy and climate change and diversity and opportunity and economic inclusion and so on? There are many concerns and considerations, and it's a real complex universe. So for a lot of people think, who don't know, that actually it's somebody decides to write a story and that's how all of this starts. Is that the truth, Bill? Where does it begin?
Well, I'll have to be honest. Most of the projects that I've worked on that have actually happened, I've written stuff on my own behalf and it's still in a drawer at home. Most of the stuff that I've actually done that's been shot has begun with a production company, a producer, and somebody who runs a television company. These are the people who have the power to make something happen. So it comes to me as an idea, would you be interested in working on such a thing? And obviously I have to say yes or no. And the first question I then ask is, can you finance it? Because it's very, very difficult to get projects financed. And although I'm happy to work on something that goes nowhere, it's not where I want to start out. I want to start out with some hope. So yes, I mean, in a sense, the people that we need to really get on board are the heads of the studios, the production chiefs, the production companies. There are a lot of independent production companies that are very committed in this area. And that takes us to the second problem, which is how do you make these stories ones that people actually want to watch, as opposed to feel they ought to want to watch.
The ones that people come to events the next day and mention they were watching last night, or go into the office and say, have you seen this new thing? That is a whole world in itself. And I'm going to leave that conversation for you and Lucy in a little bit after this, because I think that's a universe I wish I was capable of inhabiting. So let me turn back to the structural challenges in an industry that's not made up of directly controllable factors. The steel industry, you know the big steel companies, you know the supply chain, you know it's even that has its own. I'm not suggesting it's easy to decarbonize the steel industry, but it's more visible. We can see exactly how it works. It occurs to me that the job of BAFTA Albert is a very unique one, and I wonder how much of what you do is being the coach. How much of it is finding the sparks that will work with you and encourage others? How much of your job is in fact finding the bellwethers in different parts of a complex industry?
So you're right, it is a bit of a travelling circus in the sense that productions pop up, they shoot, they shut down, and it's difficult to know who owns those emissions, whose impact is this? Is it, when you've got a group of crew who are coming together and then disbanding, it's hard to know quite where the responsibility sits. And I think it does come back to the funders, the production companies, those who are commissioning things, to be thinking from the start, this is how I want to run my shoot, these are how I'm going to hire my crew, I'm going to make sure sustainability is embedded throughout. It's interesting because we've been doing a lot more work in film at the moment, and in the last couple of years, a lot of the TV broadcasters and streamers have mandated sustainability policies. But when you've got multiple funders or not one person in charge of commissioning a show, it's hard to know, again, whose responsibility that is. But it is very much about, I mean, I've seen it change so much in the last 5 years. It is really a consideration for a lot of people from the start. Because there's a lot of benefits as well to shooting sustainably. You can shoot in places that you wouldn't be able to with a diesel generator. You are engaging your crew. It's a much healthier set when you're not like pumping out diesel. So I think the willingness is there, but it is really tricky to, you know, bring everyone together. And it's a really hard job making a show or a film, and it's not everyone's top priority. So how do we just embed it in the workflows and not have it as an additional, you know, burden on people often? And people, you know, when you're a freelancer, people hire you because you're good at your job. And if you risk something, not being able to power a set, or you make a mistake on a location, you might not get another job. So it's like, how do we also give people the space to take those risks and be rewarded for trying something new and not just shooting how we've always shot?
That's a very good segue to you, Danusia, if I may. Just on the sort of the green rider, which I think is great, because I always thought that, you had to be very important to have a rider. I wished I could have a rider where you sort of list out your demands. I want that kind of tea, I want those colour M&Ms, I want, but anyway, I'm sure it's not quite as glamorous as I'm imagining it to be. But how much, I mean, is it a bit chicken and egg? Like, how much influence do the actors and the cast actually have on, by the time you're cast, is the die not already cast in terms of the whole production mechanism? How much can you do, and how much of this is more engaging actors in the ideas versus the reality of production?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head of what our campaign is constantly examining, and I think we started this in a kind of antagonistic position. We're like, the industry's not doing enough and we're going to use our contracts to demand better. And that's still part of the work we do. So we work with Equity, our trade union, to kind of embed green clauses into actors' contracts as a standard. So when you go onto a job, there will have to be some kind of discussion around sustainability, in the same way that if you were in a film and they asked you to get naked, you'd have to have some kind of discussion about where the parameters of that were. But what we've done to kind of expand the campaign beyond like that question and make it broad and something that can involve your big name actor who can walk onto a set and say, I'm only doing this job if XYZ is in place, right down to the people like me and Will, who sometimes get 3 days notice before we're suddenly on a set. And what we did was, one, because that thing about riders came up, I spoke to a really quite famous actor who was a friend who was like, I'm not powerful enough to have a rider. And I was like, you already have one, we all have them, that's what a contract is called. But we've moved towards something called a handshake, which is about like, I, actor, will do this, this and this, and I would love if production could meet me halfway and do this, this and this. And to sort of get away from that fear of like, I'm not powerful enough to demand, or from production, we can't guarantee that for you, and therefore we don't even want to get involved in the conversation because we don't want to get into a legal battle. It's become about how do we work together. So the hope is that if you turn up on a set with 3 days notice, the thing you could do is travel there more sustainably and have a discussion with production and find out what they're doing and say, I'm happy to promote what's being done, and this is some learnings that I have that maybe you guys might want to take forward to the next block. But it could also mean you turn up and you're really powerful and you ask for everything on a handshake and they go, yeah, of course, which we've had examples of, right? We've had big actors go onto the sets and go, I want this, and it happened. So it's an endless struggle to try and make sure it applies to everyone, it feels inclusive, but it's also got the highest impact it can have, and we don't lose people along the way. So,
yeah, really interesting. And Will, tell me something, is it hard to get other actors on board? Do they kind of go, why should I care? Why are you telling me this? I've got 14 auditions, and like I can barely sort of do my screen tests on time, kind of thing. My self films or whatever they do nowadays for auditions.
Self-taping.
Self-tapes. That's it.
No, I wouldn't say that actually. I think when we first started doing this, we had we pulled together a roundtable, an industry roundtable, in partnership with Equity, and we had a whole cross range of people come onto a call who don't normally talk to each other. So we had actors, we had agents, we had heads of production, we had casting directors, we had the sustainability teams at studios, and we found that actually one of the key issues was that all these different moving pieces weren't communicating with each other. And one of the inhibitors is this sort of outdated notion of status and hierarchy that you couldn't possibly bother with the actors with this sort of thing. Or those actors aren't important enough to talk to about how we run our set, dependent on which actor is in question. One thing that we found was a sort of quite consistent piece of feedback was, particularly from the production side, that we're trying our best, and actually an inhibitor is the sort of contract requests that come through the agents to us. So we are doing our best to decarbonise, this very complex project. That's made more complicated when number one on the call sheet, that means the lead basically, says that they need their own massive Winnebago, or they need to fly by private jet, or whatever it may be. And we had this instinct that we felt, particularly in the UK, to be really blunt about it, where I think we are maybe more down to earth in our culture and potentially slightly less consumerist than our friends across the pond. We had this sense that a lot of actors here don't need all the perks, like they don't care about all that, and actually would be really supportive of what we were trying to do. In part because you see crazy things happen on film sets where you might have to go from here to 100 metres down the road and they get you in a car for it. And there are reasons to that, to do with protecting costume, etc., etc. But there's also this kind of really old-fashioned hierarchy lens through which all of that is put. So in order to answer that question about, well, aren't actors going to be the problem, we put together an open letter. This is when we were just like, just volunteers. We just thought that this was like a cool thing to do. And I think it took off more than we anticipated. And we had all these famous stars put their name on it. And what was really powerful about that was I think it sent out the market signal that we really needed, which is that actually actors don't need to be inhibitors. They can be engines of change in their own right. And that's going to be very different depending on your level of power and influence. It's obviously, if you're brought onto a project 6 months before filming starts and you are the reason that it's going to go to market because you're Benedict Cumberbatch or Bella Ramsey or whoever it may be, you do have more power. But also, if you are lower down on the call sheet, if you are more of a jobbing actor, you are still in some sense treated as a bit of a tone setter, that you are watched when you're on set by the crew. The things that you do are seen, the way that you behave sets a tone, and what we see our power as doing is sort of changing what's the word I'm looking for, changing the model away from one where your status is measured by how much stuff you get to consume, to how much of a kind of contribution are you making? How collaborative can you make this project? When we see actors stepping into that more, I mean, it's kind of like what Sabrina was saying. It just like is a win-win-win for everyone. It makes the set feel more inclusive, happier. I make this joke when I go and talk to cast sometimes that we all know the difference between a set where the number one is an arsehole and where they're really lovely. It's right. It's like work culture. Like it just does make a difference. And if we can change that culture to be one that's focused on being more inclusive and being greener, everything else sort of falls into place.
That's good to hear. And I do think culture is a big part of it. And just from an industry point of view, back to Sabrina for a moment. Do you the industry's changed in terms of, Bill raised the sort of power dynamic. about who's going to fund things is often more influential on what kinds of signals are put into and story are put in than sometimes the people writing the stories. So that's kind of really interesting to sort of understand from a broader lens. But as the industries change and the dynamics of distribution of content have changed, has your job changed a lot versus, I'm sure it wasn't you personally, but what was started 15 years ago was a really different industry structure than probably where we are now. Have you guys had to change to meet different needs? Have you found the distribution mechanisms, the Netflixes and the other streamers, to be open? Have you found them to be good drivers, etc.? So, are they opening space for Bill to do the work he'd like to do?
I think it's definitely happening a lot more. There's this saying which is like, if your story doesn't have climate change in it, it's a fantasy, because that is the reality of the world we live in. And I'm finding that people are embedding a lot more, again, on the off-screen side. It is just becoming part of culture. I've got, executive producer friends text me, being like, who do you know who's a gaffer who cares about sustainability? They want this to happen. And I think, some of the streamers and the broadcasters, it has meant that it can come from within in more of that joined up way that we were kind of talking about before. When Albert started, it was just a carbon calculator, it was voluntary, and it wasn't until I joined, or kind of early 2020s, that it became mandatory. And it definitely came more of a stick than a carrot. People suddenly had to do it, and it did cause a bit of friction, because, like we were saying, the production crew don't often have that power. I came from a production background and would say, it's out of our hands. You're marking us down for all of these, jet flights, let's say, and I didn't choose to take them. So it really is about just this whole culture changing to be okay, it's no one's fault, but it is something that we all need to do, and it is a positive thing. But yeah, I feel like it definitely is changing. But also the kind of, Albert's always been there to convene, so we could kind of be one step ahead of regulation. And, you see in the construction industry and you see in other industries, there is a lot of regulation about how they operate, whereas we've kind of been, quite free to act as we do. And someone kind of needs to be and now the regulation is coming, the biodiversity, the corporate reporting, it's all catching up to where we are, and it just has to be a way in which we work now, rather than an option or a nice to have, which is what it was probably 10 years ago. It was seen as different.
So let me, in the last couple of minutes I've got with you, and then I'm going to hand over to my brilliant friend Lucy to sort of continue the conversation. But if we could just very quickly go around and say, there is an elephant in the room, in that there's a very large Hollywood, California contingent in this industry that is hugely influential. I know there's a Bollywood and Nollywood and other big centres, but most certainly, it's still, in terms of cachet, or the impression we have, is that Hollywood still has an outsized impact on the industry in general. And with the sort of retreat and withdrawal and the shifting culture, the anti-woke culture we're starting to see in programming too in the US, are you, just from a deeply personal point of view, does anybody have fears for the progress that's being made? Are you worried that you'll be able to continue to make progress? Does it make you more determined or more anxious? So just a very quick round. Let's go left to right, and then I'm going to hand over the baton to Lucy.
I know what you're talking about. I haven't experienced it at all. Nobody has said to me, oh, now that Trump has come in and everybody has to be not woke anymore, we've got to change all our stories. To be honest, Hollywood has always been about bums on seats and making money, and it still is. And if they think they can make a lot of money by blowing the world up and showing us how the world's going to end, I think they'll happily do that.
Yes, do have fears. Be mad not to. It has made life difficult in some places, I won't lie, because there is more nervousness from Hollywood studios. But I think it's giving us an opportunity to, taking it just outside of Trump, it's giving us an opportunity to look at what is underneath this kind of populist outcry, this sort of yearning for change. And I think something that we are so in danger of falling into, particularly when we get into kind of like, I went and did a talk a bit like this, sorry, I'm going on for longer than you wanted me to, but I went and did a talk like this at Hampton Court Palace, and I could not ignore the irony of talking about backlash to climate initiatives from a palace with a bunch of CEOs, and I think we just have to listen to the danger of climate becoming this sort of elite issue, which we know it isn't. We know that 80-90% of people around the world really care about it. So I think what we're starting to do is to look at how do we take this from being a climate initiative that exists in this sort of ivory tower to one that is much more founded in participation and community. I think that's the antidote to alienation and grievance, is bring people in, get them involved. It's their livelihoods, it's their lives. Let them own the solutions that we're trying to build.
Yeah, I think jumping on, I've got concerns that public bodies and organisations will feel frightened of making sort of binding state commitments and won't be very vocal publicly. What I sort of feel optimistic about, though, is I sometimes think that when there is something to fight for, art can start really taking the front line. And I've noticed and feel a kind of slight politicisation in Hollywood. There was the LA fires, now there's this, and there's beginning to be a sort of awakening in that quite high-consuming society that is this weird microcosm where it's normal to have your jet and all these things that are incredibly important in Hollywood and aren't anywhere else. I think there's a sort of sense that there's a activation in that community, and if those people start to engage in this issue and become kind of radical about it, we could see a real exciting shift.
Yeah, and I think, obviously there are concerns, but I've not seen the impact of it yet. I can see the consideration becoming higher. I can see, the impacts of certain areas coming down. But climate change is here. I think it's, so easy to make it theoretical, but people are going to be seeing the impacts, and they are seeing the impacts, and, it makes it very real. We work, as well as scripted, we work in sports, and I talk to people doing sports productions, and so many of them have had their productions disrupted. Like, it is affecting our jobs, it's affecting how we work and how we do things, and we can't really hide from it. So I think we just kind of, some of our work is about mitigation now and not just prevention. And the more that is happening, the more, people are going to have to face the reality of it.
Yes, not to mention adapting when more wildfires burn down vast tracts of cities and so on. Well, look, there are about 5,000 more questions I would love to ask all of you, but my time is up. I'm going to hand the baton to Lucy Stone, who leads Climate Spring, which I think we know now, and Lucy, it'd be great to hear more from you, has been a hugely influential player in bringing so many things together in the film industry. Lucy, please.
Thank you. Yes. So Climate Spring I set up a few years ago with some friends in the film and TV industry who were grappling with all of these questions that we've just heard being talked about. I come from a climate background and kind of realised, like many people working in the climate space a while ago, that we were losing the story, we were losing the narrative, and as any great political strategist will tell you, it's all about story, and having the best story is really what Brexit was about. It's really what Trump campaign's about. Any great campaign gives you a vision and a story that you can get behind. And it's not really about the facts. In fact, you'll put aside any quandaries you might have about the facts if you can love the story. And as Bill said, that's where we are in the climate crisis at the moment. We can see it, we can feel it, as you said, it's a lived experience now. We don't need to keep relentlessly telling people that it's a problem, they get it, but they really need answers. People need to know, well, what the hell does it mean? How do we navigate through what is now an accelerating, scary crisis? So Climate Spring is an organisation that works with many of the streamers, broadcasters, commissioners. We come in as a co-funder. So we fund and commission and work with producing companies that are interested in exploring these questions. We find writers like Bill who are interested in tackling these questions. We fund the work so that it's not being done on the side and put in a drawer that no one will read. And then, help provide that climate advice, because it's not easy how to tell a great story and think about the narrative that it's shifting. Requires a whole team to come together around that. So we're supporting projects in film and TV and drama in the US, globally, mostly English language, everything from thrillers to romantic comedies and everything in between. And what we've really noticed is there is a huge appetite. I mean, as Bill said, Hollywood is starting to see is a great market opportunity actually here. That, people don't necessarily, we're not necessarily talking about a film that will, talk about the issue, maybe, but really films and stories that explore honestly what it means to be alive at this point, at this moment that we're in. There's an audience appetite for that. So I don't know if anyone saw Don't Look Up a few years back now. It's about 4 years old now, I think. So whatever you feel about the film, it was very Marmite. It kind of divided audiences. It is still one of the most watched films on Netflix. So commercially, for Netflix, it was a wild success. It was a hugely successful feature film. And since then, the storytelling landscape's evolving and changing, and we're seeing, stories now that are looking at the root cause of the problem. Who's to blame? Who's the villain? Who are the angels, as Bill said? So I'm going to pick up the conversation on kind of where the market is and where the industry and some of the narratives that you all touched upon, which is, if we think about it as the kind of, the archetypal sort of hero-villain story, there are some definite villains. And as you said, most people are told it's their fault, really. They're the villains, when they're not. But also, where are we going? And the kind of the world-building challenge of what is the world we're trying to bring about. So maybe picking up on that, Bill, Annie, you mentioned, throughout your career, not just climate and nature crisis, but as a writer, you're interested in, the role of art and culture to explore those big questions. Any reflections, Bill?
I think all writers are. I really do. I think as a writer, you don't want to write something that is just going to be chucked away and not thought about. You want to write about the things that you really care about. And I've written many things over my life that I've cared about a lot. But what fascinates me, I wrote a thing called The March 25 years ago about a lot of starving Africans deciding to get on small boats and come across to Europe. When I did it, everybody said how ridiculous, and of course now it's happening. I think the problem that we have is that so much of these can come across as being something that makes people feel that they're being got at, that they're being punished or told they're not good enough. People don't want to be told, don't eat meat, don't fly in planes, these kinds of things. So in a sense, you've got to go sideways from that. I think there's two things you have to do. First, you have to create a story that is compelling in its own right, and that's about character and plot. You've got to make characters that people love and a plot that really engages people, which is extremely difficult. And there are some fantastic writers who do that very well. Most of us flounder. It's not easy. But you create the story, then you've got to get it out there. And to get it out there, you ask, where is the power in the business? And as I was listening to Will and Danusia, I was thinking, what we want is for them, both of them, to become extremely famous as actors.
Me too, right?
Because believe you me, a famous actor is extremely powerful. If I write, I'm writing something that Lucy and Climate Spring are helping to finance. If that script, when it eventually goes forward, is picked up by a famous actor, it will get money to be made and it will be on screens. So we need these opinion formers who are also celebrities. We're in a celebrity culture to back these things. They're not going to back it if they think it's going to be a do-good piece. They're going to be embarrassed about it and feel it'll erode their brand. They want to be a success, but also to do good. And that's the kind of game we're in. It's really difficult, but if we can pull that off, we can get these stories out to vast numbers of people. And they can say, oh, The Rock thinks this is a good thing. And, you're away. Or Will Attenborough thinks it's a good thing. Once Will Attenborough has become a superstar. So we've got to work on getting these guys when to become superstars.
No, that's exactly it. And even more so, because it is fiendishly hard to get a very good piece of film or TV made and on the screen. It is a really difficult job to do that. And talent now more than ever in what has been a constraining environment. The film and TV industry has gone through its own contraction in the last few years. Even harder, and in that environment, you're absolutely right, talent is key. Talent is driving a lot of the commercial decisions about the buyers, what Netflix will invest in and buy. It is really becoming a key driver. And often there's an assumption, right? So picking up on what you were saying, there's an assumption that actors are not going to care about this or they'll be too scared. And we know that's not the case. We just know it. I was in Hollywood in February, and exactly as you said, Danusia, there are actors and writers and producers there who've lost their homes because of the fires, who are feeling it, and they're mobilised more than ever. They need to be given a space to put that creativity and interest. And the assumption is often, well, the producers are not going to be interested, or the talent isn't, or the buyers aren't. They all are. It's the alchemy of bringing it all together. So any thoughts on that, Will, as you've kind of growing the campaign? And it's amazing, how fast the network has grown that you've built as a sort of peer-to-peer network of actors talking to each other. It feels like it's moved really fast in just the space of a year, isn't it? Last summer, Edinburgh.
It has taken our lives over, in a good way. My first reflection was thinking, Bill's such a successful writer. I can't believe you can't get something made without having to have a...
Nobody cares about the writer, I can assure you of that.
No, it's not totally true. It matters, but it's not enough, I think is what you're
writers
saying.
cannot sell it. Actually, that's not quite true. There are one or two superstar writers who probably can, but I'm not among them.
Like an Aaron Sorkin, something like that, I guess.
I think Aaron Sorkin would struggle now.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Just how it's grown, how the momentum is growing.
And also
some of the
thing
barriers.
Something that was percolating as we were talking was like, this is sort of an internal reflection for us, but I guess there's a kind of double speak in that we're, on the one hand, asking actors to redefine how they view their status, whilst also going, you have a lot of status. We're sort of going, we don't sort of measure it by the private jets you take, but recognise how big your voice is and the kind of stories that you can get out in the world and that can change the world and change culture. Which is actually, I don't know, as I'm thinking about it now, it is a delicate dance to do. I think there are actors who are very famous, who have no idea the level of impact that they have in the way that you and Bill are putting it, in terms of world-changing, world-defining. And I guess one thing that we could be saying more is, look how much the companies, brands will pay you to associate with them, because that's the power that you have. They clearly know that it's valuable.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I wonder whether and this is kind of drawing on what you're all saying, it's kind of being in the cool gang, isn't it? It's this community building, right? That you don't have to be on your own taking some risks on the side, while you're doing all your commercial work over here. It's really, this is going to be the main game in town, because whatever happens, the whole world is being rebuilt. And at the moment, it's being refashioned perhaps in, Elon Musk's vision of the world, and how is the world going to be reshaped? It's changing very, very fast at the moment, and being able to be part of that, you can't do that on your own. It's a really lonely job. We can do that by building community together at all stages, whether you're a gaffer, whether you're an actor using your star power, writer, and that kind of sense of building a community and an alliance, I think, is part of the answer. It's part of how we'll solve the climate crisis, isn't it? No one can do it on their own. We can't just wait for government. We need to come together and pull all the levers at the same time. I think that might be a good point to wrap it. Bill, do you want to
we're
final
all
word?
heavily influenced by peer pressure. Yeah. And what you're doing amongst actors and what you're doing amongst production teams is a kind of peer pressure. It's sort of shaming you know? But actually we need to be shamed. There's reason to be shamed. It's just somehow you've got to be really clever and make people, that pressure come on them, so that we all end up we wouldn't even think of going against some of these anti-climate change moves. And we can all add our voices to that, and then we all become more courageous. Yeah?
I don't think it has to be that big or splashy either. I don't know if you saw Pedro Pascal flying economy from Cannes to London,
No,
and
yeah.
he's gone viral as like hashtag climate conscious king. And that was just him getting on a flight, and everyone being like, wow, that juxtaposition between that and the private jets is something that's got everyone talking.
And sorry, last thing.
Please.
Well, I think that is really cool because Pedro Pascal's like the coolest guy in the world right now. So that's really cool. And I think what you guys are doing is also really cool because Adolescence is like the coolest show, right? Like it's a really hard-hitting, dark show, but it's like what everyone's talking about. And I think pointing to those models and go, don't you want to be part of the next era-defining piece of content is also really exciting.
It's also market tested. The framing that works the most with people is kind of the framing like, what did you do in the war? You know, Daddy, what did you do in the war? You know, what were you doing during the climate crisis? You want to have an answer to that.
That's a good one.
So, have we got time for a question from the audience, or do you want us to wrap? Yes, is that a thumbs up? Yes. Does anyone want to ask a question to this amazing panel? Can't see.
There's a hand up over there.
There's a hand up there. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is great. Do you find a difference between male and female actors on these efforts? Or male and female producers or funders?
I think amongst actors, it's felt pretty even. If we think of our core advocates, that there's a fairly even split, and also like from backgrounds and demographics as well, which feels really vital because nobody wants loads of really posh actors lecturing them about the climate crisis. So that's also been a thing for us, is like we want to make sure that we gather a group of supporters and spokespeople who represent all kinds of career levels and backgrounds and genders and all that sort of thing. I feel like from a production side, all the core climate engaged producers we know were all female, but I think that might just be to do with the people that we knew.
I think it might also reflect the climate movement, right? Like the climate movement leaders do tend to be female. I don't know if that's an element of, I was saying yesterday's thing of, this is going to be so gendered, but like maybe there's something in the sort of climate movement that's really like embraces a nurturing instinct, and that like there's a fantastic a psychotherapist that I really recommend people checking out called Terry Real, and he talks about how this very individualistic definition of manhood and masculinity that's kind of taking centre stage through the manosphere, the Andrew Tates of the world, is very like dominion dominating kind of based, and a way of being that's more relational, that's more about community. I don't know, maybe that culturally is more associated with women, but I don't know, that's me just...
I have noticed in the industry, I mean, like if I think about the commissioners at Netflix and BBC and ITV and who, you know, we talk to, there are a lot of women. And interestingly, it's often when you become a mother. So a lot of women who are then at that point in their career where they have commissioning influence, they've become a mother. And that has seemed to be a bit of a tipping point for people to really want to do something. So, and then interestingly, we just launched the Climate Fiction Book Prize at Hay. Well, the winner of the Climate Fiction. So this was the first literary prize for a long-form novel tackling the climate crisis in fiction. And what was really interesting was the winner, Abby Dare, with an amazing book, And So I Roar, I recommend it. She was interviewed on stage at Hay, and it was a kind of sold-out, packed audience. There was a queue around the block, and then she went to do book signings afterwards. And the team at Hay said, what is this phenomenon going on? Who is this amazing author with this star power? And she's talking about climate, and this is really popular, and everybody's here. So, you know, she is a very charismatic, interesting author, you know, that is bringing new audience to climate fiction. But interestingly, in the climate fiction space, it's very dominated by female writers at the moment. I don't know why, but that does seem to be the case. But yes. Any final questions from the audience before we close? And I think that's not. I can't see right at the back. Okay. Shall we? Do you want us to wrap it up there? Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much, audience, for joining us. Thank you, amazing panel, doing incredible work. It's very exciting to see where this is going to go over the coming months. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.